You finish writing your data analysis chapter, thinking your dissertation is almost done. You've come a long way for sure, but there's one last chapter that can make or break your grade. The conclusion chapter. And this is where many students lose marks because they don't get this chapter right. You've spent months working on your dissertation, and imagine your frustration if you then get the feedback like,
while an overview of the results is provided, objectives are not explicitly revisited,
or objectives are revisited and briefly summarized, and while there is some discussion against the literature is limited. In this video, I'll show you 3 examples of underwhelming conclusions so that you'll see exactly where they fell short and understand how to fix it. When looking at these examples, you will learn why addressing objectives is vital, what it takes to address objectives well, and at the end of this video, I'll summarize the characteristics of a strong conclusion so that you know what to do and what to avoid. If you apply what you learn in this video, your conclusion can go from average to distinction level. Keep watching until the end if you want to avoid the same mistakes many students do and work towards writing a strong conclusion. Let's look at the first example. This is an example of a weak conclusion because objectives are not explicitly revisited. Not all is bad in this example, so let's start with the good. The student provides a bit of the background of the research. She attempts to make links to the literature since there is some reference to motivational theories, as well as efforts to connect these theories to the context of UK music festivals. She covered the basics of the process by providing a description of the methodology, and she identifies the 4 main motivation dimensions, as given by the results of the study, highlighting which one was the main motivation. However, on the whole, this is an example of a poor conclusion because there are 4 main failings that undermine its strength. The first one is that objectives are not explicitly revisited. Many students forget the main purpose of the conclusion: answer research objectives. In the introduction, you ask questions, the objectives, and in the conclusion, you address the answer based on the work that you've done. In this example, there is a brief reference to one objective. The dissertation had more, but this is isolated and not next to the respective results. Weakness number 2 relates to the focus being on process over outcomes. Much of the conclusion focuses on background and process, and not on what was found or interpreted. Paragraph 1 and 2 are about the background of the research. The third paragraph narrates what was done, describing questionnaire logistics and the use of SPSS, and only the last paragraph is about outcomes, which is not nearly enough. The final conclusion, the result indicated 4 main motivation dimensions and entertainment was considered the main motivator, are stated plainly, without connecting implications, critical comparisons, or unexpected nuances. There is no discussion of the 4 main motivations against the literature, and neither there is discussion of why entertainment dominates, how it contrasts with prior research, or what it suggests about festival attendee behavior. And regretfully, the results paragraph does not include a single reference. Further evidence that there is no discussion of results. The final weakness is about structure and style. In terms of structure, the example lacks a clear flow, while paragraphs are reasonably compact, or in other words, they address a clear theme. The ideas within some paragraphs are jumbled, and there is also limited flow between paragraphs. For example, the student mentions an objective in paragraph 2, but it's only in paragraph 4 that she attempts to answer it. And stylistically, the writing feels at times towards the informal, which weakens the academic tone. In summary, objective re-engagement is largely missing, synthesis of findings is minimal, interpretation and reflection is non-existent, conceptual closure is missing, and the academic tone is weak and informal. From this example, we can start to see how the importance of a strong literature review extends beyond the literature review chapter. Basically, the literature review is vital to write every single chapter in the dissertation, including the conclusion. I have created a free literature review masterclass which will help you to level up your literature review skills. You will learn about essential areas such as what a literature review is and why it's a crucial part of your dissertation, what is your real dissertation topic so that you review the right literature, how effective literature analysis techniques can make your review insightful, and how easy and fast it is to write a strong review from good analysis. A link to the masterclass is in the description below. Keep watching, because at the end I'll break down the 4 key characteristics you should consider when addressing objectives in the conclusion chapter. In this second example, objectives are revisited, but the focus is on what was done to answer them, not on what the research found. This example is better for 2 reasons. The student explicitly names and revisits each objective, which improves coherence and helps the reader to follow the argument, and this is a key strength compared to the previous example. There's at least an attempt to close the research loop by revisiting each objective. And the second, this step-by-step response to each objective in order provides a logical flow. This means that the conclusion shows basic organizational awareness and aligns each paragraph with a specific goal, which is better than free-form summarizing. While better than the previous example, there are still several important shortcomings in this one. Objectives 1 and 2 are confined to literature review summaries, and while objectives 3 and 4 refer to interview content, insights are underdeveloped. Objectives 1, 2, and 4 are what I call process objectives, with objective 3 being the only end or outcome objective. This is a major limitation because your dissertation is first and foremost guided by end objectives. This immediately limits the focus of the conclusion on what it should be, about the outcomes. And if you are unsure about what I mean by process and end objectives, check out the video about this topic. I'll share a link in the description below. Weakness number 2 is that the student mixes how they fulfilled objectives, what was done, with what was found. This is particularly evident in objective 3, when the student says this data was obtained through interviews conducted with participants. The student is talking about the process of research. And when the student says the methods they used, which are also part of the risk management process, are stakeholders such as the local police force, medical teams, environmental health agencies, and private security, that is results. So this paragraph mixes the two. The third weakness is that when results are reported, they are not discussed. There's no contrast with existing literature, demonstrating a lack of analytical depth. Do you see any references in paragraph 4 where results are presented? Nope. And weakness 4 is that since there's no discussion against the literature, naturally this conclusion does not show any conceptual closure. In summary, in this example, objective re-engagement is clear and structured, the synthesis of findings is weak, the interpretation and reflection element is missing, conceptual closure is also missing, and the academic tone is acceptable but a bit bland. Before we dive into the third example, if you're feeling unsure about how to tackle your dissertation conclusion or any other chapter, I've got something that can make the process easier. I've created the virtual tutor, which is a resource full of practical, step-by-step videos that guide you through every stage of your dissertation journey. From shaping your research questions to crafting a strong conclusion, it is designed to support you from start to finish. And if you need deeper, more personalized input, I also offer one-to-one dissertation support. That means working together directly on your project, sharpening your structure, strengthening your arguments, and ensuring your work achieves the level you're aiming for. Details about these are in the description below. Time to look at the third example, which is better but still has several weaknesses. Sometimes the objectives are clearly addressed and the results are summarized, yet the interpretation is very limited, if not lacking completely. And that's what example 3 shows. Let's start with the good, as this example shows many strengths when compared to the previous example. Like in the previous example, objectives are explicitly revisited, with the objective 1 being a process objective, focuses on reviewing the literature, while objectives 2, 3, and 4 are end or outcome objectives. In other words, they are explicitly tied to the primary data that was collected. In this example, there's also a much better integration of findings as the student links specific findings to each objective, summarizing what was discovered through both secondary research in objective 1 and primary research in objectives 2, 3, and 4. As a result, there is evidence of effort to go beyond surface-level summary, even if on the whole it lacks depth. Another positive is that objective 1 includes literature to back up findings, which strengthens the academic tone. And finally, the student acknowledges variation in experiences and outcomes across different types of participants and contexts, thus recognizing complexity in results. While better, there are still important weaknesses in this example. The first one is that there is still limited interpretation and synthesis. And we can confirm this weakness when we see findings summarized but not discussed in depth, and also in the minimal critical engagement, since findings are not compared against the literature and any implications of results are not addressed. Seeing objectives with no references always sets the alarm bell ringing, as far as the extent of interpretation and synthesis is concerned. Weakness number 2 is that there's no overarching reflection that ties all objectives together. The conclusion lacks a final synthesis or reflection on the research contribution. The question, what is it that the study adds to the field, is not answered, and as a consequence, there's no conceptual closure. The third and final weakness is that the tone is not sufficiently precise. First, the tone is too casual at times, and we can see that when the student says it is just an aspect of the job which you get used to, and it sounds very conversational, possibly appropriate for a blog post, but not in a dissertation. The second weakness related to tone is that wording is not precise enough, making the findings feel less impactful than they actually are. At one point, the student says, the majority of participants divulge information, confirming that gender information can still be a problem. Phrases like can still be a problem lack clarity. What kind of problem? What impact does it have? Is it systemic? Is it sporadic? These questions are not answered. In summary, in this example, objective re-engagement is clear and structured. In terms of the synthesis of findings, there is a tentative summary. As far as interpretation and reflection, this is absent, and conceptual closure is missing. And in terms of the academic tone, it's probably better, but still occasionally informal. Drop a comment if any of these examples reminds you of your own draft. From these 3 examples, what can we learn about writing a strong conclusion? Well, if you want to write a strong conclusion, you should explicitly address each objective. Failing to explicitly answer your research questions means that the conclusion misses its core purpose and risks being incomplete. Second, you should avoid treating the conclusion as a mere recap. Simply repeating the results without linking them to objectives and theory weakens the reach of the results and misses out on the critical interpretation that is expected in a conclusion. Third, you should thoroughly reflect against the literature. If you list results without synthesizing their wider meaning, your ability to demonstrate conceptual insight is affected, reducing the grade potential. And finally, you should show conceptual closure. This is because the strong conclusions revisit and evolve the theoretical understanding. Or in other words, you should show how the study contributes to our understanding of the theoretical principles associated to your research area. The more you satisfy these characteristics, the stronger your conclusion chapter will be. Ideally, what you want to do is to explain what you found in relation to each objective, and then thoroughly discuss it against the theory while showing some sort of conceptual closure. This is exactly what one of my students has expertly done. And guess what? I've analyzed this example in a video that features in the virtual tutor resource. Again, The link to the resource is in the description below. To be able to address objectives well in the conclusion, you have to first formulate strong objectives. In this video, I explained the two objectives that exist and why one of them should be your priority, and YouTube thinks you will like this video. Thanks for watching.